It's Veritas Forum with Dr. Craig Johnson, Professor in Residence of Chalcedon Christian Academy and Pastor of Bethel Christian Fellowship in Agora Hills.
Welcome to Veritas Forum. My name is Craig Johnson. My special guest today is James Patrick Holding, President of Tecton Apologetics. Welcome, JP.
Thank you, Craig. Glad to be here today.
Well, we're going to talk about Bill Maher today and Religulous. Religulous.
Yes,
Tell us,
indeed.
who is Bill Maher and why should we be listening to this man?
Bill Maher. Well, you know, I don't watch a lot of TV in my house. Most of the time when it comes on, it's either Mythbusters or Dirty Jobs. But I do know that Bill Maher is a comedian and that he had a program called Politically Incorrect. And one of his specialties was sarcasm, especially against religious people, as I understand. As far as why we should be concerned with this man and this film Religulous, well, he's publicizing his views. And in particular, he was on the talk show The View recently promoting some of his views on religion. And so this is mainstream stuff now. This is not just something hidden away in a corner. This is things that we're going to hear about from our friends, family, and neighbors for the duration.
Now, what about the film Religulous? What's the film about?
The film is basically a series of what I could call ambush interviews, where Maher goes up to people who have not been told that he is going to be coming, for the most part, and asks them a bunch of questions that he thinks are very difficult questions about their religion. And then when they give their answers, he tries to find something to make fun of in those answers. Now, he says he didn't focus on irrational believers, or he didn't go seeking out people that he thought wouldn't be able to answer questions. And here's a quote from him. He said, "Everybody we talked to was reasonable. They're normally functioning people." Well, they may have been reasonable people, but there's a difference between being reasonable and knowledgeable. Okay? Just because they're reasonable people doesn't mean they're going to be expected to be able to answer any questions that he comes up with.
So in the film, there's cherry picking going on, right? He's picking people that he believes are a representative sample, but they don't seem to be too representative.
For the representation that he wants to portray. And he wants to portray religious people as ignorant, as basically people who don't know what they believe or why, that just go about their business uncritically.
So what's going on in the film? Giving us an overview of the film.
Well, the film is a series of interviews strung together. You know, sometimes it flips between the interviews, in which he, first he had introduced himself, his crew, to the people, and then later on he showed up and started asking them questions. Half of the film is devoted to Christian subjects. The other half is devoted to non-Christian subjects. He has about 3 or 4 Islamic subjects. Talks about Scientology, Mormonism, Judaism, several different people. Among the people he talks to, for example, he goes to the Creation Museum in Petersburg, Kentucky, and ambushes them. He speaks to Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project. He speaks to a gentleman in charge of a group called Exchange Ministries, which is for recovering homosexuals. And he goes to the Holy Land Experience, which is kind of like a quasi-biblical theme park, I suppose.
And that's near you in Florida.
It's 10 miles away from me. I pass by it once a week at least, as far away from it as possible.
Now tell me, what's wrong with the film? Is it an honest look at religion?
It is definitely not an honest look at religion. It is very much a cherry-picked view of religion. Very much a case where he tried to get the answers he wanted and where he edited to get exactly what he wanted, which was to make people look as foolish as possible. What I have here, now I happen to know many of the people at the Creation Museum, and I spoke with Ken Ham, the gentleman in charge of Answers in Genesis, and also his public relations man sent me some material. They forwarded me a copy of an email that was sent to them by Maher's crew on January 30th, 2007. I won't read entirely through it, but let me just read one sample from it. After introducing themselves, they say, "Our documentary seeks to explore the cultural landscape of the United States through highlighting religious centers, historical sites, and key religious experts." Now, does anything mention Maher in there? Does this sound like something where I'm going to show up and make fun of you? It doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like something like a documentary, something straightforward. But that's not what it is at all. And what eventually happened is the crew showed up at the Creation Museum, took a tour, took some film, and while this was going on, at some point they distracted some of the people there, and they opened up a back door and let Maher in through the back door. He wasn't supposed to be coming in through the back door. They violated their security protocols there that they had in place at the time to let him in through a back door. And he came in, snuck into where Ken Ham was sitting, and interviewed him. Now, Ken Ham wasn't aware of who Maher was exactly because he's from Australia. He doesn't know as much about American television personalities. And so he went through with the interview, and at some point the Answers in Genesis PR man found out what had happened and came up to the office where Ken Ham was with Maher. And Maher says, "Oh, this was just a misunderstanding." He misrepresented himself totally in why he came.
What is Bill bringing up issues that are new? Are these new arguments? Are these new perspectives? Or
No, absolutely not. He is not bringing up anything new in any of the things he says to any of these people. Now, I should point out, though, that what he does do is bring up things that he knows that they are not experts in many cases. When he spoke to Francis Collins of the Human Genome Project, you would expect him to talk with him about what? Intelligent design, evolution, and whatnot? Well, instead, in the film, all that they talk about is the authorship of the Gospels. Now, Collins is an intelligent man, certainly, but that's not his expertise. And he knows and Maher knows that's not his expertise. And I found a place where Collins had written to someone explaining this and saying, well, I felt, kind of used in that, because he asked me about things that were not my expertise. I thought we were going to talk about intelligent design. And in other cases, he goes to the people at the Holy Land experience. Who did he interview there? He interviewed the actor who plays Jesus in their Passion play. And he starts asking them a bunch of questions about, well, why doesn't God solve evil right now? Now, do you think the actor who plays Jesus is any kind of theologian who's capable of answering these questions right off the bat, especially in an ambush interview? And then he brings up things like, well, the story of Jesus was stolen from pagan gods like Mithra or Dionysus or Eris. And the guy who plays Jesus is like, well, I don't know anything about that. Of course he doesn't. These are things that only obscure scholars know about for the most part. Now, I'm trying to change that, of course. I'm trying to bring more knowledge of this kind of thing out in the open. But for the average Christian on the street, what will they know about the pagan deity Mithra?
that's right.
He talks to people in the Holy Land Experience gift shop, starts asking them questions.
Well, that's a well of wisdom. Right?
If you're already in a gift shop in a tourist trap, you're definitely a well of wisdom.
Now, you are president of Tecton Apologetics.
Yes, sir.
You are dealing primarily with cynics and skeptics and people that are attacking the Christian faith from all levels. So you're comfortable dealing with the issues that Maher was bringing up.
Oh, yes. Now, if Maher had tried to ambush me, that would never have made the cut. My scene would have been left on the cutting room floor. But it's interesting because Maher was caught at the Holy Land Experience after misrepresenting himself. And he actually shows that off like a badge of honor in the Religulous film. He shows himself being caught by the PR people there, and then he shows the lead woman there like complaining about him being there, saying, "Do you know who this guy is?" And on the background they play Piranha Woman to mock her. He's proud of having been caught at that.
So give us just an overview of the mindset that we're dealing with when you're dealing with the contemporary critics, the fundamentalists, in their realms of criticism and cynicism. Are they style? Are they substance?
They are mostly style, but they think they are substance. Okay, and that's where a lot of the deception comes in, especially the self-deception. Maher no doubt believes that he knows a lot about religion, but he doesn't know very much about it at all. Now, I don't know exactly where he got some of his information about the pagan deities being copies for Jesus. I know some of the sources that he might have used, and these are not competent sources. These are not scholars in the field. These are not religious authorities.
And we'll be doing future programs on every one of these topics.
We'll be talking about some of those things. He believes that he found qualified sources on this information that he put onto the film. Obviously, he doesn't know any better. But that's the danger. He thinks he knows better. And so to that effect, when he interviews someone like the guy at the Holy Land Experience who plays Jesus, he's posing this as, see, I'm interviewing Jesus, and he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Now, he claims to be an agnostic, that he can't know, and nor can anyone else know anything about ultimate issues. And he seems that he's very secure in his knowledge of that, but it seems to be, do you see a lot of critics retreating to that kind of agnostic position?
Very seldom. In that, he is a little unique. He will retreat to his agnosticism, although I think that in his case, that is his ultimate refuge, because whenever he gets cornered, that's all he can go to. That's his fallback defense position. In many other cases, the people I deal with, their fallback position is to pretend that they know what they're talking about. And to that extent, that might be what Maher does. He might change the subject on you. That's what he did with Collins. Instead of talking about what Collins knew about, or showing in the film, what he and Collins talked about related to Collins' base of knowledge, he switched the topic. So they were talking about something else. And so, if I'm going to start talking to you about nuclear physics and you know nothing about it, but I know a lot about it, of course you're going to look stupid and I'm going to look smart. But that's based on the premise that that's what I came here to talk to you about.
But it's often said perception is reality. People love Maher. He's sharp. He's intelligent. I met him back in the early 80s when he was at the Comedy Store doing stand-up. Actually took him aside one time at the end of one of his sets and asked him, I said, you're pretty caustic. Are you an atheist? And he said, absolutely not. He said, I believe in God. But what is it that you're seeing? What are the common threads in Bill Maher's presentation in addition to the other critics and skeptics that you're dealing with? Are there commonalities that they have in style and substance?
The commonality, if there is one at all, is that they simply try to find quick answers that say what they want, and that they can present in turn to other people in order to convince them of their point of view. He would have no conception, I think, of doing real in-depth research, of going to a library, of looking up qualified sources that know business about Mithra and about all these other pagan deities, so that he can verify what he's talking about. What he wants is an answer in a can to go. He wants this as quickly as possible so that he can present it, and his main focus is to make fun of people, because he assumes he's right already. Okay?
So he is mocking people, and that is sometimes passed off as intelligence, as being literate in an issue, and they're probably going to Google or Wikipedia articles on the subjects, which brings us to one of your sensitive spots. You're president of Tecton Apologetics, and our viewers can go online and find your presence on the internet. But you're very strict about your scholarly sources and how you go about the scholarly apparatus. What's wrong with Google? What's wrong with Wikipedia and the people that are getting quick answers?
Well, there's nothing wrong inherently with these search tools. My training is as a librarian, and for many years I was trained in using databases like Google, like Wikipedia is now. There's nothing inherently wrong with them as they are, but you have to understand what they are. They are not the final answer. That is what people are using them for. Now, Wikipedia is excellent as a starting point. It's like your encyclopedia in your public library, your Britannica. It's a very good place to start if you want to do research. But many people go onto Wikipedia and they think, this is the final answer, I don't have to look any further. That's where I get irritated. And that's why I call Wikipedia the abomination that causes misinformation.
The abomination of misinformation, which Daniel spoke about.
That's correct.
No. But when you go online, and you're in your book, Shattering the Christ Myth, which is a wonderful book, by the way, you point out that there are 24-year-olds passing themselves off as textual scholars, New Testament textual scholars, because they're putting articles together, cutting and pasting articles together. But the average Joe sitting at home looking up a topic, they have no defense against these self-proclaimed experts.
No, not at all. And of course, the average Joe has bills to pay. He has other things to do. The kids are spilling the milk in the kitchen. He doesn't have time to go look up all these things. All he's going to do is look up Wikipedia too. And he's not going to find the answers he wants to some of these issues. I think people like Maher know this. And I think that's why they go for the answer in a can, because they're just looking for some polemical advantage to advance some other agenda they have going.
Now, in your book, Shattering the Christ Myth, there are some wonderful chapters dealing with the broad claims that are made in the public square right now, that Christianity is just a copycat religion of various dying and resurrecting gods, and there are many virgin-born dying, resurrecting gods all throughout antiquity, and we'll be doing individual shows on those topics. But the information, like such as presented in the film Zeitgeist, for instance, if you're untutored and unlearned, and you see this wonderfully produced film come on, and you are told these things, there seems to be no defense. There's no point of reference from which you could contest this kind of information.
Absolutely, and that hits again what Maher is trying to do with his presentation, which is, if you have this very nice film, that's going to impress people. The technical aspects are going to impress people, and it's going to seem to give the facts or claims of fact he presents credibility. And that's where the danger is, as you say. The average Joe isn't going to know any differently. He's going to see a nicely made film, and what's he going to think of it? Well, these guys know what they're doing when they make film. Obviously, they know what they're doing with the facts as well. It's too easy for them to assume that.
Mark Twain used to say, get the facts first, and then you can twist them all you want. But so perception is reality. People are viewing a man with Maher's talents and gifts and abilities, and he seems to be intelligent. He was on Larry King the other day pontificating on the political system in the country, and he's a talking head. He's a comedian. He has a microphone. But people immediately associate that with scholarly expertise.
He's entertaining, but this is a man who thinks the title of the book of Revelation has an S on the end.
Yeah. Now, what other errors did you see in the movie when you were able to see the full presentation?
Let me go through just a few of these. The interview at the Holy Land Experience, he talks about evolution a bit and talks about the acceptance of Bronze Age beliefs, and he lifts on the screen several unscientific beliefs of Bronze Age people. Well, that's not too smart, because I understand he believes that germs don't cause disease. And so he has some unscientific views himself. He had an interview with Mark Pryor, the senator from Arkansas. He had an interview with some truckers at a chapel in Raleigh, North Carolina. And there he brought up the idea that Jesus didn't exist, although he didn't elaborate on it. And he asked, how can you accept things as part of Christianity that are not in the Bible, such as popes? Apparently he didn't realize he was talking to Protestants, not to Catholics there. How can you accept the virgin birth? Well, that's in the Bible, but he says it's not in 2 of the Gospels, so how can you accept it? Original sin, how can you accept that when it's not in the Bible? I'm sorry, Romans 5 is still in my Bible. Is it in yours? I believe it still is there. And he claims that the Gospels are not history and that the authors never met Jesus, which is false. 2 of the 4 did meet Jesus, Matthew and John. When he spoke to the gentleman in charge of exchange ministries, the one for recovering homosexuals, he made an issue of the fact that Jesus never mentioned homosexuality. He says, why you make a big deal of this if Jesus never mentioned homosexuality? Jesus would not mention homosexuality, because in Judea, in Palestine, where he was teaching, it was already taken for granted, based on the Old Testament, that it was wrong. So he had nothing he needed to say about that. Paul, in contrast, speaking to the Gentiles, would have something to say about it. So that's just a sample of what he went through. And I will say this as well, to be fair. When he dealt with Mormons and the other groups, he was no more fair to them. You know, I've written on the Mormons, so I know.
You've written the book, The
yes,
Mormon Defenders.
That's correct.
So you're an expert in Mormonism.
That's correct. So I know, how to argue about them. But he did not treat them fairly. What he did in many cases was he simply showed animated versions of their teachings, I guess from children's videos that they have, and it's as though he's giving an authoritative view on their teachings. That's not going to work. I think he would have been run over as well by any one of their apologists, such as one of their people from the Foundation for Ancient Research and Mormon Studies. He would not have survived an interview with one of them.
So basically, what is the net result of these kind of programs in the effect that they have on the culture? Do you think they have a major effect, a minor effect?
They vary considerably. I think Religulous in particular will continue to have a major effect, especially once it gets onto DVD, which is, as many movies tend to go very quickly to DVD these days. As that spreads around, people are going to loan it to their friends. People are going to believe that. They'll recognize Maher's name, and they'll give him instant credibility. Zeitgeist, the same thing. I get questions about Zeitgeist regularly.
And that film, give us a little background.
That film is essentially the same thing we mentioned earlier, where Jesus was said to have been a copy of pagan gods. It has some other elements in it, such as believing that the World Trade Center bombing was a conspiracy, but our main concern is with the pagan god thesis. And I received questions about that for a while, like 3 or 4 a month. It's trickled down to more like 1 a month these days. But so many people wrote to me and said, I'm so glad you have this information available to us. And I have links to people who refuted Zeitgeist. They said, I'm so glad you had this available, because I had no idea what to do about it.
Now, your book, Shattering the Christ Myth, is a very important book because you address all of these major issues that are brought up in Zeitgeist, that are brought up in Religulous, that are brought up in our culture, and to high school students, to young college students. They're being sold an awful lot of theories with regard to feeling they're debunking Christianity. Your book is fashioned to fill that niche.
Yeah.
What is the response to the book that you've seen thus far?
So far, the response has been very good. Now, the book itself is an update of many of the articles I've had on the site for quite a while. More up-to-date information on most of the chapters. Other chapters are entirely new. The Christ myth, for a long time, was the province of very obscure people. You seldom heard about it. Now, with people like Maher, with films like Zeitgeist bringing it to the fore, we're hearing more and more people asking about that issue.
I had not read a book other than Ronald Nash's book, Christianity in the Hellenistic World, which in its day was one of the only treatments of some of these issues. And yet, it's such a specialized field of knowledge, and overnight it's become so popular. Do you see people learning more about this topic where they can defend their faith more readily?
I see them seeing the need to, and will have one of two reactions. They'll either be completely frustrated and their faith will be in danger, or they will go out and look for the answers. There's got to be some kind of answer out there. And so I'm here to help those that go looking for the answers.
So James Patrick Holding, they
Yes.
can go on Google, or Tecton Apologetics,
Yes.
JP Holding, and whenever they go online, they see your internet presence, and you are a treasure trove of articles that link from one to another and one to another. Once you get on your site, people can stay for hours and hours and hours because every article is linked to all of your other articles. It seems that all that you do is type all day long.
I did for many years, and now I'm typing in different venues. That's what the books are all about.
So your internet presence is significant. There are a lot of Christian apologetic sites, people that deal with the arguments for the existence of God, people that deal with the creation evolution issue, Bible and science. You have a specialty. What is your specialty?
My particular specialty is the New Testament, authenticity of the records of the New Testament, the resurrection of Jesus, interpreting the New Testament, exegesis. I try to stay away from things like evolution. I stay away from things like the Old Testament for the most part, and the philosophical questions like, does God exist? I've decided to focus in mainly on the history of the New Testament because that's where the heart of our faith lies. And there is, as you say, a certain need for this. There are not too many websites that try to go to the depth I do on these things. There are going to be more and more people interested in it, and I know a couple of people who have been inspired to start their own website by what I've done. And hopefully we'll see a lot more of that in the future, because people are starting to realize, because of people like Maher, that we need to get out there and address some of these issues, because otherwise we're going to have people coming to us with questions. We're going to have people dropping their faith, not going to church anymore, not professing to believe in Jesus Christ as Savior anymore.
And what a crime when the arguments are warmed over historical hash, warmed over philosophical hash. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new. In our following programs, we're going to be doing an exhaustive and detailed study of all of these views to show that the sources these people are using are outdated. This isn't new. The church has had a response to this from the time immemorial, and you're just putting a focus on these answers. Now, when people go on the internet, are they linked easily to you? When people look up on Google, different things about Jesus and Savior, other Savior gods, and so on, are they able to get to you quickly?
I've designed it so that the search engines like Google are attracted to the articles that I have. Yeah, and I want to make a point too. We were talking about how these affect people. I think Maher is an example of that, because in one part of the movie he speaks of his former idea of God when he was a child, saying, it was an imaginary man who lived in my head, who got mad at me if I was bad, and who I had to bargain with if I was bad. And I was always like, oh, please, God, get me out of this. Just get me out of this. I promise I will never do this again. Now, you and I know that that is a very primitive, backwards understanding of God. What if someone had educated him a little better? What if he had educated himself a little better? But this is precisely why people fall away from the faith, and why they quit the church, why they say they're no longer Christians, because they don't get the right information.
You have written a book for youth, which I'm so excited about. What is the title?
The title is Blowing the Doors Off. It's due to be out this month, November 2008. I just approved the galleys last week, and it should be in print very soon.
And this is essentially bringing this information down to where our young people can get a hold of it before they go into high school, before they go into college.
That's correct. That's correct. And what I had in mind to do especially was to make it so that it could be understood at that level. And then I provide links or book references for more information. Say, well, if this is not enough for you, here's where you start, but then go and look at this material when you want or when you need more information.
So if a Christian teenager were to read your book and become informed with regard to these issues, and then go with their friends to see Religulous, what would be the different response versus going in unarmed?
Well, the one who had read the book would be able to see right through everything Maher was saying. And they'd be able to tell their friends about it. Now, I don't know what their friends are going to say. In a lot of cases, I think they're going to say, oh, no, come on, that's nonsense. They have the documentation. At that point, they can at least challenge them and say, take a fair look at this. Look at what we say on the other side. Don't just believe what you hear in that film. just because he's a major television personality, or just because you like what he says. Look at both sides fairly, and that's really all we can ask people to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. And providing the information so they can be inoculated in
Exactly.
a good sense, to be able to recognize what's going on. Again, the Christian faith is not afraid of challenge, not afraid of being examined, not afraid. We are set to give a defense for the faith once delivered to the saints. But that implies that we're going to have to engage in the culture. And I want to thank you for all the hard work that you're doing on Tecton Apologetics. Shattering the Christ Myth is one of the finest books I've read in the last 10 years. I recommend it to everyone. It's easy to find on Amazon.com, Shattering the Christ Myth, James Patrick Holding. We are going to be doing a series of programs. We're going to be sitting together and changing our shirts occasionally and doing about 10 programs the next few days. But we're going to be touching on all of these areas because what you don't know what you don't know. And the Christian community, even those educated apologetically, still don't have any personal experience with regard to most of the issues Maher was bringing up in Religulous.
That's right.
So hopefully these programs will serve as an antidote to that kind of attitude and tone and body language.
And when it's too late is not the time to find out.
That's right. So now is the time. Shattering the Christ Myth, The Mormon Defenders, author of The Impossible Faith, and the youth book, Blowing the Doors Off. And that's going to be available this month. JP, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Craig.
Welcome to the forum, and
Thank
we're
you.
looking forward to future programs.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
God bless everybody.
God bless.